Hello, and welcome to Season 5 of the Your Neurodiverse Relationship podcast. I'm Jodi, Carlton, your host, and I'm a neurodiverse relationship expert. But like so many of you, I've been on my own journey of discovering and understanding neurodiversity, both in my personal life with my family members and even myself, and professionally as a therapist and now relationship coach to people around the world. I'm often asked, can neurodiverse partner relationships actually work? And the answer is absolutely they can. Just like any relationship, there are core variables that influence whether or not you'll thrive as a couple. Neurodiverse relationships are no different, but they have the added layer of being neurodiverse, where one or both partners is neurodivergent. So this season, I've got a lineup of couples and partners who are in neurodiverse relationships that are working. They get real personal with me about the challenges they have faced and how they've overcome those challenges in their relationships. Let's get started. This episode is part 2 of my conversation with Randall and Ashley. And if you missed part 1, you definitely want to go back and watch that because they have so much to add about how they discovered that he's autistic and the challenges that they face, but also the strategies that they use to really make their relationship better and make life in general better for both of them. But now let's get started with part 2. What are some of the things now that you know you have this framework that you've learned that has really helped your relationship?
I've learned quite a bit, and I'll just share a few things, a lot of which I learned by talking to you and talking to Ashley. And one of my very favorite, I'm going to call them life hacks, is your 2 or 10. I probably think about the 2 or 10, I don't know, 10 times a day. I guess a great example is loading the dishwasher. So Ashley and I do not load the dishwasher in the same way. Honestly, one of the reasons is that she has better spatial awareness than I have. So she is able to load the dishwasher more efficiently, that holds more dishes, but I load it in a certain way because I prefer it to be in a certain order rather than maximizing the efficiency. So in the 2 or 10, when we realized we loaded dishwashers differently, I had to decide, okay, on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the most important, where does this rank in things that are important to me? And obviously, loading the dishwasher in the grand scheme is not that important. So it's pretty low. So we'll give that a 2. And then I go, okay, if we load the dishwasher differently, is that worth an argument? Is that worth an offhanded comment? Those kind of things. Or it's just one of those things you go, who cares if we can load the dishwasher differently? But what we do is when she's doing the dishes, she loads it the way that she wants to. And then when I load it the way I want to. And the most important thing is that we're loading the dishwasher. It's not important how it gets loaded.
Oh my gosh, I cannot tell you guys how many couples have problems with the dishwasher. Just this week, I had a client, I was working with a couple that the dishwasher was an issue. It comes up so much. And so those 2 questions with that 2 or 10 scale is how important is this to me and how much is this going to impact my life? And the second question there, if Ashley and I end up arguing over this, that's an impact. That's really going to impact our life. But if we don't argue about it, we're okay, and the dishes still get washed. I'm so glad you shared that tool. I use it all the time myself too, and with my kids and just in my own life. I think it's been so helpful to help learn how to prioritize the things that you do give any energy to, because why bother if it's really not that important or it's not going to impact your life much? Well, how about you, Ashley? Is that tool something you use as well, or do you prompt Randy to use it?
Yeah, with the same example, for me, it was frustrating because he'll load the dishwasher and there's still half the dishes still sitting on the counter. And I'm like, if you did it this way, but with the 2 or 10, I don't know how many times I have loaded the dishwasher. While loading the dishwasher, thinking about that and thinking about how this is so minor. But also, I don't want to make him feel like he's doing something wrong or like his method is inferior or anything like that, and appreciate that even though we do it differently, we are still working together. And I have a partner who helps me and pulls his weight in our relationship.
Who loads the dishwasher? Yeah.
Exactly.
And sometimes we
That's a
forget
good
about
thing.
that. We get too lost in the nuances and the how to do something, and we forget that things don't have to make sense to both of us in the same way, as we still accomplish the same goal. Randy, go ahead. It looks like you had something to say.
Well, I wanted her, if she feel like it, to talk about your I'm okay discovery.
Okay. Well, I mentioned in the beginning, I do have some sensory processing issues myself. And Randy, he has 3 children
Mhm.
from previous relationship. And we suspect that all 3 are on the spectrum.
Mhm.
And so for me, with the diagnosis, it was with him and with the kids because I would go out in the world and do okay. And then I would come in my house, my own home, and somehow I was like an outsider or I was so weird. So there has been a struggle at different points relating to the kids sometimes because it's interesting that, like I said, we're pretty sure all 3 are on the spectrum, but they present in such different ways. But yeah, sometimes I would feel overwhelmed and attacked sometimes, but that wasn't the intention
Mhm.
on any of their parts. But sometimes they ask a lot of questions. They don't understand something, and so they just go with the
Mhm.
questions, like 20 questions, bam. From my perspective, it felt like criticism, and
Mhm.
I would feel attacked, and so my brain would shut down.
Mhm.
And then I would feel even worse because I felt like I couldn't answer the questions. And if you can't answer the questions,
You're invalidated.
Mhm.
your reasoning doesn't make any sense. Therefore, it's wrong and it's stupid, is what I would get from
Mhm.
that. And we discussed it probably a few times. And your advice to me was when I felt in that moment of brain freeze or kind of thing to just keep telling myself that I'm okay. I'm okay. And so I started doing that and it was really helpful. And I think part of that too is because I would also struggle with I must be stupid if I can't think of anything to
Mhm.
say or response to this. And I'm not sure how, but it helped me with that too, because I
Mhm.
realized I'm not dumb. I'm just this sensory overloaded and my brain is protecting itself. So I can do that more. And I feel like it's made a difference. But I also feel like it has one of the kids was struggling recently with a separate issue for him, but basically I think he's have a lot of anxiety about different things, and we used it with him too.
Mm.
And he had a moment where he just really realized at the end of the day, I'm okay.
Yeah. So what you just described, let's go back through a little bit of what you said and using these tools. I love that you're using them with your family because that's how we can help teach this next generation so much that we didn't know these things until way down the road in our lives. But going back, so what you experienced is you're in this household full of neurodivergents who are firing at you these logic left brain like, questions, and so you got flooded. You flooded, and then your brain shut down and went into the freeze mode, which is part of that fight, flight, freeze response. And so you and I had talked about how when your brain does that, it's interpreting what you're experiencing as danger, as a threat. And so it's reacting like you're in danger. And so the telling yourself, I'm okay, I'm not actually in danger, I'm okay, that can be really helpful. And it sounds like it's really helped you a lot in that situation. And what I also want to really emphasize is my neurotypical partners like you, Ashley, have very similar experiences, whether it's woman who's neurotypical or the husband that's neurotypical. When the family of their partner, even the children, their own children or stepchildren or the extended family has a lot of neurodivergence, that's when the neurotypical partner really feels like I'm the outsider. And there's all these brains that are functioning in a way that I don't understand and they don't understand me and they're coming at me and I feel attacked. Whereas something that's really helpful is to recognize that each one of those individuals, when they go out in the world, they're the outsider. So I think there's a lot of empathy to be gained and learned from what you just said, because that's that double empathy thing. Autistics, ADHD, anybody who has neurodivergence, it's neurodivergent, meaning the neurotypicals are the most commonly occurring traits in the world, the most common thinkers and sensory perceivers and how our brains work. When people like you, Randy, go out in the world, you're different. You feel different from everybody else, or you didn't for the longest time. You didn't realize you were, but then at some point it started to become more clear. Whereas for you, Ashley, when you're out there in the world, like you said, when I'm out there, I do fine, but then I come into this family and I'm the outsider. So I think it's really important that we can all learn some empathy from each other about what that's like for both neurotypicals in neurodiverse relationships and neurodivergent individuals when they go out into the world. So thank you for sharing that. I think that's really going to resonate with a lot of people. So what else do you got on your list?
I think part of the I'm okay thing I wanted to talk about was what Ashley's had to learn is because I'm going to have bad days and I'm going to have days that I'm overwhelmed or woke up with no spoons or whatever it is. And she's really good about trying to give me advice because I'm not sure if neurotypicals really understand, but when I start going into a autistic meltdown, which unfortunately I do have those, I'm not seeing the world as it's actually happening anymore. I have a skewed perspective. It makes me get confused and feel in danger and things like that. And there are things that I can do to help me out in those situations. I've learned that I love hoodies. I've learned that weighted blankets or pillows or things like that are helpful. And doing my special interests, things like that can help me bring it, come out of that before I actually have a meltdown. But when I do those things, and Ashley's reminded me, hey, you probably need to go read one of your books or something like that. She obviously, because she loves me, she gets upset when I'm upset, but she's got to, in this case, stay a healthy level away because she's got to understand that, and I know there's a term for it. I can't remember what it is, but she's trying to take on my emotions in that moment, or she used to. And I think she's better now at going, okay, he's having a hard time with this, but that doesn't mean there's anything wrong with me. I'm okay. And I just need to let him go through this. And it doesn't mean that something's happening to her. So I think that was a big thing for us as well.
Yeah, so you're referring to
Martin.
emotional empathy. So there's cognitive empathy, which is our ability to recognize someone else's perspective or thoughts about something. Frame of reference is different, but emotional empathy is actually being able to really feel and join up with somebody what they're actually experiencing and feeling. And that can be really overwhelming for somebody like you, Ashley, when you're feeling that distress along with him. But then the other piece of that is this desire to rescue someone from those feelings. And that's a boundary that's really important for people to learn is to, like you said, Randall, to keep a healthy distance from it. So Ashley, what were your thoughts about that?
That's been huge for me to learn is that when he feels upset, that's not something I can fix. And I can give a gentle reminder to you might want to go crawl in a hole, put your hoodie on, that kind of stuff. But I can't really do anything more than that. And if he's actually melting down, I've learned that absolutely nothing I say is going to help him. So I have to just give him space and let him get through that. So later he's in a different frame of mind because he's finally expended that energy. And that's the biggest thing is I can't actually fix anything here, but that separation and back to the I'm okay, he's going to do what he needs to do in the moment. And then we'll come back together and we'll talk about it.
Well, and I think what you said, Randy, about when you're having that meltdown, you're not experiencing reality as it is. Your brain is essentially having a circuit overload. And so everything is overwhelming, it's overloaded. There's no capacity for logic and reason in those moments. And it's just something that you have to get to the other side of it. You have to let it play out. And I think that's a really important thing for us to know, those of us who are in relationships with autistic or even ADHD, because sometimes ADHD people can have a meltdown as well. And it's not behavioral. And that's something that's really important to recognize, that a behavioral tantrum can turn on a dime. People who are having a behavioral tantrum can turn it off and on. I remember this, I have this video. I don't know why I was filming my kids, but my son was, I think, about a year old, and my daughter's probably 3 or 4. I was in the kitchen, and I had a gate that they were like a baby gate. They did not want to be on the other side of that gate, and they were both screaming their heads off. And I think I just went to open my phone. This was like old school phone cameras. So, but I was filming them and the gate failed. I mean, they're both screaming like they're dying. The gate failed and it popped open and they were like, it just stopped. And they just came walking in the kitchen. And I just started laughing because I thought, man, you can turn that off the minute you want to. That's not what a meltdown looks like. That's a behavioral tantrum. And a meltdown, though, is this absolute circuit overload in the brain. And Ashley, what you said is really important that if you're seeing someone have a meltdown, you can sometimes help. If it's possible, you can direct them, you can bring them the weighted blanket or bring them the hoodie that they can then put on themselves. But most people who are in the middle of a meltdown can't even really have a conversation with you. Randy, would you agree with that?
Usually, if she's able to help me in those moments where I'm able to actually help myself, it's usually before I've actually gotten to full meltdown. Once I get there, I used to really not understand the issues with executive functioning, but now I understand it better, which is when I get to meltdown point, my brain won't even process normal things. I don't really know what's going on. I'm confused and I'm definitely hopeless. And it's just gotta, like you said, you just have to ride it out at that point. So our strategy is always, of course, to try to recognize the signs and not have the meltdown. And I've even gotten to the point where I will try to avoid anything that I think might make me have a meltdown just to avoid that whole thing because it's really, really ugly.
Yeah, I totally agree with everything you just said that prevention is so important. And so you have to become self aware. That's part of the process of really self reflective and self aware so that you can anticipate that's probably going to cause a meltdown. That's probably going to be overwhelming for me. This is not a good idea for me. So, what are some of the things that you've done or what are some things you've identified and how have you restructured your life to help your system, help your brain not get overloaded?
So there are a lot of things, and most of which I learned from you. So thank you for that. But just making sure that we'll go back and use the I'm okay thing again. I really, really feel comfort in my routines. I really feel comfort in knowing what my day is going to hold for me, things like that. If things go sideways, I know I don't have to wait until I have a reaction. I know I'm going to have a reaction. So then I need a little time, and time for me is important. I'm going to have time to process the change that just happened. If I try to just dive into it, it's probably not going to turn out too great. Those kind of things. We talked about weighted blankets and hoodies and little things like that to make you feel some comfort in times of distress. And I'm sure I'll forget a lot of things, but it's very difficult for me sometimes to recognize the signs. So I've had to work really hard at trying to understand when something's going to go wrong. And whenever I can get out of a situation, I do. One of the things we talked about with me being at work, because at work, you can't necessarily just leave for an hour. We talked about doing things where I cross the midline, things like that, to try to move around a little bit. And if I can take 5 minutes just to catch my breath and try to recenter, I try to do those things at work. So there's just a lot.
Can I just jump in and explain to listeners that crossing the midlines, that is a technique that helps activate both sides of the brain, and it's a very regulatory type thing. That's part of what we call sensory diet. Sensory diet is not about food. It's about the things that we do with our body that help the brain regulate itself. And so activities or actions where we literally turn one side of our body, like our appendages, our arms, from one side to the other, helps activate crossing that midline of the brain, and it helps regulate the system. So that's something that you can do if you feel anxiety starting to rise, or even push-ups or wall push-ups if you can't do a real push-ups in your seat, just things that kind of give your body input and sensation. Occupational therapists are the ones that are really good at helping with learning some of those sensory regulatory. That's where I learned a lot that I teach you. So I learned it for my own kids and for myself. Yeah. So you were saying you're not always able to recognize it as it's creeping on. A lot of what you do is prevention. You're planning it. And I just want to emphasize when you said that, this is why routines are so important. especially for the autistic brain, not the ADHD brain. It's almost the opposite with the ADHD brain that's always dopamine seeking. But the autistic brain really needs those routines. It's not about being a control freak. It's not about controlling others. It's about controlling what the demands on my body are going to be, the demands on my brain are going to be. And that routine provides safety and comfort. And then a deviation from that is now, what is my body, what is my brain going to have to deal with? And like you said, sometimes you just know it's going to go sideways. And so when something spontaneous happens, then it's like you implement the emergency protocol. It's like, what do I need to do to keep myself as regulated as possible? So Ashley, what's it been like for you then to learn more about how important, like we started off the call about the routine of eating. And if we have a plan to eat, then we need to follow the plan. What's that been like for you then to learn more about how his brain works?
It's like a lot of things, I'd say it's a mix, because there can be a certain stability there, like a comfort. I know what to expect from him. Like, he's so consistent. But then sometimes things do need to change, or they're just going to change. And that's just how life is. And so sometimes it can be a challenge when he's resistant to change, and a challenge as far as some changes are minor and some are stressful. And then there's another layer of his resistance to the change and needing to process it, and also dealing with that other side that's already stressful. So that can be challenging. But overall, I'd say it kind of goes back to, I kind of like that he does have such a routine, because we talked about it early in our marriage before we even realized that he was on the spectrum. He would talk about how he did things the same way all the time. And I told him, I was like, I like that too until I don't. You know, it's like I like the structure, but then every now and then I like to change it up. And we really worked well together, I felt like, in that respect. But now we have a better understanding, because I understand now why he doesn't necessarily want to change it up. We can manage those times sometimes if it's something that I'm needing. It's not like a circumstantial kind of thing, but just I've found that talking to him about it, which is an issue I have, because I tend not to talk about or verbalize things. So I've learned on my part to bring it up and discuss it with him. And he does so much better with things when we do that. And it's ahead of whatever it is. Advance notice.
Yes.
If he understands that something is important to me, or something is making me feel bad, he's totally willing to listen. And if I give him that time to process it, usually he'll come back to me and, how about this? Let's do it this way.
I know you're going to have lots of stuff to talk about too, but if we have time, I'd like to talk about holidays a little bit.
Yeah.
Talking about the routine and changes in the routine and things like that. That's obviously, the holidays are one of the most stressful times of the year for me. And so I want to say a few things in the hopes that maybe other people who are struggling with the same thing might understand. We do try to find some humor in the things that we've learned. And when we first met, I told her that I do not like surprises. She says, well, I partially believed you. Certainly people like good surprises though. And then she realized that when I said I don't like surprises, I don't like surprises of any kind.
Right.
And holidays bring a lot of surprises, and people, are doing so with good faith effort, like gifts. I don't like gifts.
Right.
Because when someone hands me a gift that's wrapped and I don't know what's in it, I don't know how I'm supposed to react when I open it, because I don't know what it is. I don't have time to, prepare myself for the reaction that I'm supposed to have. And so getting a wrapped present is one of the most stressful things in the world for me.
One thing on that we've learned is, as a neurotypical, it feels so wrong, because even from a little kid, you're told, don't tell people what their gift is.
Oh, right.
Do not tell. But we've learned that if I know what his gift is before he gets it, I
Mm.
tell him
Mhm.
because that gives him time to process before he
Mhm.
opens it. And it's
Mhm.
not a surprise anymore.
You're talking about surprises. It's uncertainty. Uncertainty is like the nightmare of the autistic brain, and gifts are uncertain unless you get some heads up. So anybody's listening, no surprise parties, okay? No surprise parties. This is not a good thing. And a lot of people who are autistic don't like gifts at all. They don't like giving gifts either, because how do I even predict if someone's going to like a gift? What gift do I give them? That's not a surprise to you, but it's also uncertainty. And I think a lot of neurotypical partners don't understand that, because they'll give their spouse or even their kids, their neurodivergent kids or parents, a gift and then feel hurt by just a blank response, or even a response that's a little bit hurtful but not intended to be hurtful, because there was no preparation. So I think that's really valuable what you're sharing there. What else about the holidays?
Some of the best life hacks that I've learned are, keep your routine as much as you can before and after the event
Mm-hmm.
to make sure your battery's charged. You gave me the advice years ago, on the days that there's a family event, don't plan anything else. It's all about charging up your battery before
Yeah.
you go and then having time to recover afterwards. And this is not necessarily related to just holidays, but whenever you go out, this was another funny story that we have. We were planning to go out to eat at a Mexican restaurant in town, and we got in the car. We drove to the restaurant. The restaurant parking lot was very crowded, so I kept driving. And then Ashley is looking at me and she says, "What are you doing?" Well, that was going to be stressful for me. So I just, drove right past and,
Mm-hmm.
kept going. So now we know that whenever we go out, and I think I actually picked this tip up from a guy who lives in England, but he said he always has a plan A, a plan B, and a plan C
Mm-hmm.
before he leaves the house. And that way, if plan A, that plan goes by somehow, he's got his other two plans. So if you go to the Mexican restaurant and it's full, then you need to have another restaurant picked out as your plan B. And
Mm-hmm.
that has made things so much less stressful because we
Mm-hmm.
know we've got backup plans in place. And that
Mm.
still then becomes part of the plan.
Right.
You don't have to worry about one thing derailing everything.
So there's no surprise. You've built in
Right.
your options. So now if plan A doesn't work out, you've already got your options. And then you can do that just as an individual person in your life, but as a couple, especially if you're going to, like you said, Mexican restaurant or to a family event, just to have all those different options planned out ahead of time so that you're all on the same page. You know what the plans are. And I really tell couples too to agree upon some kind of code word or hand gesture or signal or text or something to communicate when you need to engage plan B or you need to take a break or whatever it is. Just that pre-planning and preparation can be so pivotal to having a positive experience versus ending up having a meltdown.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's really great. And by the way, one of our code words from a movie is, of course, mistletoe. So in the holidays, when it's getting to be too much, you just use the code word mistletoe.
Meet me under the
You know, it's
mistletoe. That's great. I love
so
that.
I think I would add about the tips for the holidays
Mm-hmm.
is it always is better on him if he can have like a day after all of the holidays to
Mm-hmm.
rest and
Mm-hmm.
recover. And I think it helps him going into it because he knows he has that day after. Because when he has to on Sunday have a get together and then on Monday he's in work, he usually has a very difficult time on Monday
Mm-hmm.
and he may melt down at some point
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
after, but he doesn't do that as much if he can have a day to just relax.
Yeah, I think that's really important around the holidays, but also just when you go on vacations or trips to not plan to get back the day before going back to work, to give yourself a recovery day or two, if possible. If it's a longer event versus just an afternoon with the family, that recovery is so important. As you guys were talking, I'm thinking, I have my holiday course that's like tips and strategies to get through the holidays. And I just released it again for this year. And I talk about so many of these things. You guys have really learned and incorporated it into your lives. And so I think it's helpful, so helpful for people to hear how you've started using these tips and it's really made a huge impact on your life, your quality of life and your relationship quality. As we close, I'd like to hear from both of you. In what way has all of this impacted your marriage? And like just zooming out into more globally speaking, the quality of your connection and relationship.
I'm glad you brought that up because I did want to bring it all together and say, from the very beginning until now, 5 years later, the question at the beginning was often, is it better to know or to not know? And I would go back and forth because there was a certain bliss from being ignorant back in the old days. But at this point, we know that it is better to know because the more you know about yourself and the more you know about your the other person in a relationship, whoever that is, the more you can work through things and have a healthier relationship. And at this point, I wouldn't change anything because even though I felt like we had a very strong, healthy relationship before diagnosis, and it's only gotten stronger because we've learned more about ourselves. And there's so many conflicts that can be avoided. One of the things that you always say that I think is really important to remember is that we're not opponents. We're on the same team with this. And there's not a game to be won in the relationship because we're in it together. And I think the whole journey for me has been that I know that we're better off having known. And I think it's made me a more empathetic and compassionate person for other people. I studied people before, but now I study them through a different lens. And I really pick up on things that they may be dealing with and maybe feeling. And I'm a lot more sympathetic and empathetic to those kind of things.
I'm so glad you said that because a lot of people ask me, can an autistic person develop and improve their emotional IQ? And what you just described is that exact process. And yes, they can. And so sometimes that emotional IQ or empathy quotient, there's an EQ10, you mentioned the AQ10, which is the autism quotient index. The empathizing quotient has to do with that emotional intelligence and being able to recognize and read people. And there's this myth that autistic individuals can't develop that, when in reality, it's like any other skill. There may be some limitations of capacity, but you're the perfect example. And the same is true for neurotypical individuals. Some neurotypicals don't have that empathizing skill set, and it's important for them to learn it as well. So I'm glad that you shared that. How about you, Ashley? How's this overall, do you feel like affected your marriage and your relationship?
I agree with everything that he said. I feel like we had a pretty strong marriage to begin with. We thought we needed to do some things to make sure that we would remain okay in the long term, like going everywhere together. And even at home, I would feel like what we needed to be doing everything together at home. We were really good, but some things we just didn't realize. And once we did, I feel like our relationship has been stronger because we've been able to foster our individuality and be stronger as individuals, and our relationship has improved because of that. Because then we talk about these things too, and it's not like I'm changing by myself or he's changing by himself. We're talking, and I feel like we're cheering each other. Yeah, it's made us stronger as a couple.
I love what both of you shared with all of that. And I want to just emphasize that neurodivergence is about neurotype. And we talk about diagnosis, which there's the psychological profession has looked at neurodiversity, autism as something that's a mental health diagnosis. But really, I'm of the persuasion, and I have a cohort that agrees with me on this, that a neurotype is not in and of itself a mental disorder. It's like being tall or being short. There are some pros to being tall, but there are some disadvantages to being tall. Ask anybody who's 6'4" and has to get on an airplane in economy. But the same is true with neurotypes. There are some major advantages to being neurodivergent, are innovators. They're those thinkers. But then there's some downsides too. So it's not about you, Randy, being a dysfunctional person because you're autistic. It's more about you being autistic as a neurotype, which has its downsides, but it also has its upsides. And so learning that question of what to know or not to know, I am all in favor of knowing is better because there's a little bit of element of ignorance is bliss there, but then there's so much confusion and misunderstanding that, especially in relationships and even just in interacting in the world, that the more you know, the more you can understand about yourself, about the rest of the world. And that just leads to, again, goes back to quality of life, much better quality of life, whether it's in your marriage or at work. You mentioned work and just strategies that you and I have talked about for you to use at work and even to share with your bosses. And that's why I do this podcast, so that people can learn about each other. And again, I know a lot of people are going to resonate with everything that you've shared here today. So I really, really appreciate you being here. And if you at any point in the future, you decide you've got more to share, just let me know and we'll schedule another podcast. Any last parting words at all?
No, just thank you so much for having us. And we really appreciate you. And you have helped us so much. And we appreciate all you do because you've helped us one-on-one talking with you, but your podcasts and all the information you put out has helped.
Well, thank you for that. And you're welcome. And I just want to give the two of you kudos, though, because you have really taken everything I've shared with you and embraced it and applied it and implemented it. And that is on you. That is the work that you've done. And it's really paid off so much. So good job, you guys. All right. Thanks again for being on the podcast. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
That's a wrap for today's episode. Be sure to subscribe or follow the podcast so you won't miss any of these amazing interviews. And as always, if you're benefiting and enjoying this podcast, please give us a review. It really helps other people know that this podcast is really beneficial and worth listening to. Thanks for watching on YouTube or tuning in to your favorite podcast platform. And don't forget to visit me online at jodicarlton.com for more resources. I have assessment quizzes, educational articles, courses, and more. And if you have any questions, just reach out to my team at gethelp@jodicarlton.com. Until next time.